World News Now. U.S. President Donald Trump announces a trade deal with South Korea. Under that agreement, the U.S. will charge 15% tariff on imports from South Korea.
1 day to go. The latest deal that has been announced is the one with South Korea, as mentioned. Goods from that country will now face a 15% tariff, according to the administration.
Korea.
He also says that Korea committed to $100 billion in LNG purchases, with potentially more investment to be announced in days to come. And in exchange, Trump will then impose tariffs of just 15% on all Korean exports to the U.S., including on cars.
In Washington, unease is spreading quietly, the kind that few officials are willing to acknowledge out loud. South Korea, long considered one of America's most dependable allies in East Asia, appears to be charting a subtle but significant new course. For decades, Seoul stood shoulder to shoulder with Washington, an essential link in a defense chain designed to contain both China and North Korea. But recent reporting from outlets such as Nikkei Asia and the Washington Post suggests that this once rock-solid partnership is beginning to show signs of drift. Behind the polite smiles of diplomacy, faint cracks are appearing in a relationship that was once thought unbreakable. The shift began with an event few imagined would ignite a diplomatic storm. When Donald Trump reignited his anti-immigration campaign, one of its early targets became dozens of South Korean employees working at Hyundai's plant in Georgia. This facility had long been hailed as a symbol of industrial cooperation between Seoul and Washington, Korean engineering and American labor combining to create a model of global partnership. That image was shattered when Trump publicly accused foreign workers of stealing American jobs and announced sweeping deportations. The move triggered outrage in Seoul. What was seen in Washington as a domestic policy maneuver felt, from Seoul's perspective, like a personal insult. When 300 South Korean workers returned home to Incheon Airport to cheers and television cameras, the mood was celebratory but bitter. In a private briefing shortly afterward, South Korea's industry minister admitted that for the first time in 3 decades of joint ventures, the Korean side felt unwelcome. That moment quietly marked the start of a slow freeze between two longtime allies. American officials attempted damage control, framing the deportations as an internal political issue rather than a foreign policy statement. For a time, Seoul gave Washington the benefit of the doubt. But the tone changed dramatically after Lee Jae-myung assumed office as South Korea's new president. According to reports from Reuters and Bloomberg, Lee's administration began quietly exploring diplomatic back channels with Beijing. Publicly, these were described as efforts to stabilize the economy amid global uncertainty. Privately, however, they served as a reminder to Washington. South Korea had options and could pursue an independent foreign policy if necessary. Leaked documents from Seoul's foreign ministry reveal that deputy ministers from both South Korea and China held a series of confidential meetings. Their agenda included establishing trade insurance mechanisms, a financial buffer that would allow both nations to offset losses triggered by American tariffs. Information later published in the South China Morning Post indicated that Beijing proposed an even broader vision, a new framework for cooperation centered on shared supply chains for electronics, rare earth materials, and advanced battery components, effectively bypassing U.S. control. Analysts at Singapore's Institute of Strategic Studies warned that the move was about far more than economics. It represented a subtle political message, a declaration that Seoul no longer intended to play a passive role in Washington's trade battles. That signal grew louder when President Lee stated in a televised JTBC interview, "We are grateful to the United States for decades of partnership, but the era of unconditional dependence is over. Korea must protect its own interests." The comment hit Washington like a thunderclap. Within hours, Trump lashed out on Truth Social, accusing Seoul of double-dealing and threatening to reassess America's military commitments on the Korean peninsula. In Seoul, however, the response was measured. Major newspapers such as the Korea Herald and Hankyoreh criticized Trump's reaction, calling it transactional and short-sighted. One columnist wrote that the U.S. had lost the ability to listen to its allies and now spoke only in ultimatums. While official statements on both sides attempted to cool tempers, a new revelation soon deepened Washington's concern. According to Bloomberg Asia, a high-ranking South Korean delegation traveled to Beijing under the pretext of attending an economic forum. Behind closed doors, they reportedly discussed limited participation in China's Belt and Road Initiative. For the United States, that possibility represented a strategic setback. Seoul had long been viewed as a cornerstone in Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy to contain Chinese influence. Yet, as Yonhap News later reported, South Korean officials were not seeking to abandon their alliance but to diversify economic options. If America imposes tariffs that strangle export while China offers open markets, one unnamed lawmaker said, what nation can afford to ignore the alternative? The tipping point arrived in early October, when Trump announced a new wave of tariffs on Chinese goods set to take effect on November 1st. America's traditional allies, Japan, Australia, and the UK, voiced support. South Korea did not. Instead, Seoul remained silent and quietly sent a diplomatic message to Beijing expressing understanding of China's position. Analysts at Stratfor and the RAND Corporation interpreted this as a signal of something deeper. South Korea were preparing to redefine its place in the global order. Mark Lippert, a former U.S. ambassador to Seoul, told CNN that the dynamic between the two nations had fundamentally changed. For years, he said, China was perceived as a strategic threat. Now, Lippert added, it's becoming an insurance policy against American unpredictability. Trump's volatile trade and immigration policies, he argued, had left many Asian allies wondering if Washington might one day turn on them as well. Trump treats allies like clients, Lippert warned, as if they can be replaced whenever it's convenient. Amid the growing distrust, Seoul widened its diplomatic reach, not only toward Beijing but also Moscow. Reports from the Financial Times revealed that South Korea was exploring potential collaboration with both China and Russia on energy development projects in the Far East. Just a few years ago, such an initiative would have been politically unthinkable. Today, it reflects the evolving reality of multipolar power politics. These moves have not gone unnoticed in Washington. Members of Congress have called for investigations into whether South Korea's new partnerships could violate intelligence sharing agreements, including those tied to the Five Eyes framework. Politico reported that the White House is drafting new diplomatic pressure measures, potentially involving reduced funding for joint defense programs and stricter export controls on sensitive technologies. For now, both nations insist that their alliance remains intact. Yet beneath the formal gestures and reassuring statements, the mood is changing. South Korea's leadership appears increasingly determined to assert independence, balancing its deep historical ties to the United States with the economic gravity of China's rise. Whether this represents a temporary recalibration or the early stages of a lasting geopolitical shift remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, Washington's influence in East Asia is no longer assumed. It must now be owned, rebuilt, and redefined in an era when even America's closest friends are learning to look both ways. That in Washington, concern is quietly deepening. South Korea, once seen as one of America's most reliable allies in East Asia, appears to be shifting course. While the U.S. still views the alliance as a cornerstone of regional stability, Seoul's behavior increasingly suggests a more independent and pragmatic approach. The transition has been gradual but undeniable, reflecting not only changes in leadership but also a generational re-evaluation of what partnership with Washington truly means. Analysts at the Brookings Institution recently warned that Washington's heavy-handed tactics are backfiring. In their latest report, they concluded that every new threat and ultimatum from the United States only pushes Seoul closer to Beijing. What once seemed unthinkable, a tilt by South Korea toward China, is slowly becoming a geopolitical reality. Public opinion inside South Korea mirrors this trend. The younger generation, less shaped by memories of the Korean War and more attuned to global markets, increasingly favors a balanced foreign policy. A Gallup Korea survey found that nearly half of respondents believe their nation should maintain equal distance between Washington and Beijing rather than depend solely on the U.S. for protection or technology. Universities have begun hosting public debates on the cost of sanctions and trade wars, while television programs openly question whether America still represents stability or if it has become a source of volatility. According to The Economist, President Lee's administration is finalizing a long-term strategic blueprint through 2030 that redefines China not as a rival, but as a necessary economic partner built on measured trust. A key objective of this plan reportedly involves reducing South Korea's exposure to American sanctions. The policy shift, though subtle, underscores how far Seoul's mindset has evolved. Regional analysts have labeled this transformation the Second Asian Drift, a gradual but visible shift of traditional U.S. partners toward a more balanced, multipolar alignment. The Philippines took early steps in that direction, strengthening ties with Beijing. Now, Many experts believe South Korea may be following a similar path. For Washington, this emerging reality poses serious challenges to its Indo-Pacific strategy. According to Politico Asia, the Pentagon recently sent a quiet delegation to Seoul. Officially, the visit focused on military coordination. Unofficially, its purpose was to dissuade South Korea from deepening its relationship with Beijing. But Professor Park of Korea University believes these efforts come too late. America is losing influence not through war or coups, he said, but through policies that alienate its allies. Indeed, South Korea's rise from poverty to prosperity was built in large part with American support. Yet as Washington embraces protectionism, Seoul faces a difficult truth. It must navigate an increasingly fragmented world economy defined by tariffs, supply chain disruptions, and great power rivalries. For many in Seoul, aligning more closely with Beijing is viewed less as betrayal and more as a pragmatic necessity. Stability, not ideology, is a priority. American think tanks have begun sounding the alarm. Several have warned that unless Washington rethinks its tone and strategy, South Korea could become the first U.S. ally to formally embrace a multipolar partnership that includes China. In Beijing, policymakers appear ready to seize the opportunity. The Global Times recently reported that Chinese officials are preparing to offer Seoul a special status within new regional economic frameworks. Behind the scenes, discussions are reportedly underway at the United Nations about a trilateral meeting between the foreign ministers of China, South Korea, and Russia, an effort to outline a new cooperative model. Meanwhile, Washington is preparing a countermove. CNN reports that a congressional delegation will soon travel to Seoul to reaffirm America's commitment and clarify its position. Yet many South Korean commentators doubt that the visit will reverse the shift in public mood. The alliance that once symbolized America's strength in East Asia now stands at a crossroads, tested by changing loyalties, rising ambitions, and the relentless logic of economic survival. Adding further strain to the relationship, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced that the long-awaited trade agreement between Washington and Seoul would not be finalized during President Donald Trump's current tour of Asia. Speaking aboard Air Force One en route from Malaysia to Japan, Bessent described the deal as a complex project still being refined.